On December 6, 1941, submarines were still the curious misfits of the Navy. No one quite knew what to do with them. Many admirals believed they were suitable mostly for reconnaissance work for the massive battleships and destroyers, which formed the backbone of the Navy, or possibly as coastal guard ships. After the attack on Pearl Harbor and Manila on December 7th and 8th, submarines were suddenly thrust into the front lines as the largest and most complete line of defense remaining in the Pacific. Momsen was soon assigned to command submarine squadrons 2 and 4 from Pearl Harbor. In the summer of 1943, Momsen, along with Admiral Lockwood and the torpedo crew at Pearl Harbor, proved that the newest defect with the Mark 14 torpedo was a faulty firing pin that crushed rather than triggered the warhead upon contact. Momsen's simple and effective test was to take the muskellunge, full of torpedoes, out off Kahulawe Cliff, and then retrieve the first, live, dud. The test was a success, though Admiral Lockwood later admitted, "While a practical idea, I suspected we would find ourselves shaking hands with St. Peter when we tried to examine a dud warhead loaded with 685 pounds of TNT." The firing pin was the third and final defect in the Mark 14 torpedo, which had been plaguing the submarine force all through the war. That fall, again in 1943, Momsen and Captain Babe Brown also advocated and convinced Admiral Lockwood to send out several submarines fighting in a coordinated wolf pack, rather than as individual lone wolves. The Japanese were using larger and larger convoys, which also traveled with more and better armed escorts. One submarine, if discovered, had no backup in case of attack. Multiple submarines hunting together could not only sink more ships simultaneously, but provide cover for one another in case of counterattack. Momsen himself led the first wolf pack in October of 1943, and by the end of the war, wolf packs accounted for a large number of patrols and successes. After World War II and the beginning of the nuclear ship era, Momsen used sleight of hand to change the submarine from her World War II configuration to her modern look. While Admiral Hyman Rickover was feverishly working on a nuclear propulsion unit which could safely fit inside the confines of a submarine, few seemed to see the implications of his success. World War II engines required more oxygen than could be stored or recycled aboard a submarine. So every night a submarine would surface and run her engines to charge her batteries, which would then power her underwater systems. World War II-era submarines like Silverside's had a pointed bow, double props, and many other surface ship characteristics, including the wooden deck. On the surface, submarines were some of the fastest naval ships around, able to reach 21 knots or almost 40 miles an hour. But once underwater, that same shape caused so much drag, the best submarines could hope for was around 9 knots, and even then it would use up battery power very quickly. A nuclear power plant, on the other hand, would not require such air supplies, and therefore could be run constantly underwater, eliminating the need to surface, thus eliminating the need to have surface ship characteristics. But the planned nuclear Nautilus was being built inside the same diesel submarine-shaped hull, and Momsen knew he'd have to try something unusual to prove the old hull design would become a liability. Having now worked for decades in the Navy, he also knew no one would authorize an experimental nuclear submarine just to test a new hull design. They might, however, authorize a stripped-down submarine specifically designed to be hunted and targeted by the surface fleet for practice. And that was how he submitted his design. It worked out even better than he could have wished. As a design target submarine, his new boat, to be named Albacore, did not have to have any weaponry, so Momsen did not have to consult with the Bureaus of Ordnance, or the Bureau of Engineering, or the Bureau of Navigation, or even his old Bureau of Construction and Repair. He told his designers simply, "Forget about surface performance. Think only about submerged capability which will provide the utmost speed with the minimum power. And when in doubt, think speed." What resulted looked a little bit like an air blimp. A smooth, sleek shape, with a tower just large enough to hold the periscopes and antennae. The old double props had been used mostly for surface maneuvers and had therefore been scrapped for a single prop. The flat deck was now gone. Albacore's round shape permitted not only for better capabilities underwater, but equally distributed the ocean's pressure, allowing her to dive deeper than ever before. Whatever the Navy may have initially thought of her, Albacore soon proved she was faster and far more maneuverable than any of her predecessors. And to Momsen's delight, she outran, outmaneuvered, and outperformed anything sent to hunt her. Even with the limitations of her diesel engines, surface ships often had to order Albacore to slow down in order to find her. The proof was in. And in 1959, 6 years after the Albacore and 5 years after the Nautilus launched, the Skipjack, which married nuclear propulsion with the Albacore's hull, launched, and all modern submarines have continued in this pattern. Momsen retired in 1955, shortly after the Albacore entered service, and died of lung cancer in 1967. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Momsen, DDG-92, was named in his honor and commissioned in 2004. Admiral Momsen's daughter, Evelyn Momsen Haley, was her sponsor. Though little known outside the secrecy of the silent service, Momsen's inventions and ideas continue to influence the submarine force even today.